So I'd begun the drawing by sketching out the composition in a hard pencil, and I was working on a mixed media paper, and I was using watercolour pencils, so I decided I was going to draw the objects themselves using much more of the sort of pencil technique, and for the reflection in the tin foil that they were standing on, I was using the wet to wet technique. So you can see me blocking in some early colour, and then where they're reflected, I've laid down some water, and then I'm dropping in some colour into that, into the water, to give that sort of very diffused look. And I wanted there to be a real difference in the way I drew the objects and the reflected surface. So the objects I tried to draw with crisper lines, harder lines and more defined edges. And the wet to wet I've used on the reflected surface was very painterly, and I really let the colour just bleed into each other. And where you see the transition in the film, that's where I've left the drawing to dry. So it's an important aspect of using watercolour pencils, is you really have to be quite patient building this up in layers. So by this stage I'd also used a graphite pencil and wash to put in some of the tone for the tinfoil surface, and I was building up the colour on the objects and in the reflection. And then the next bit is quite interesting because I put in some dark tone for the reflection of the pepper pot, and then I decided it was just too dark, I'd gone in too heavy. So as a general rule, the reflected surface will probably, the colour and the tone will probably be less intense, less saturated and lighter in tone than the actual objects. So you can see me dabbing away here because I decided to take some of that away because I didn't want it to overbalance the pepper pot itself. You can see me working on the bauble here, and the bauble was really the worst aspect of my drawing. It was so shiny and reflected everything in the room. So I was trying to edit it down, but I could have spent 2 hours on that bit alone. But what I did do to try and convey some of that highly reflective surface was I used lines which were very crisp and high key contrast, so a transition from a very dark to a very light in a single jump with no blending, just to try and get across that very highly polished surface. So quite different to the way you can see me working on the glass here, which was also shiny and reflective, but I've blended the tone much more because it was slightly softer. So it's all about looking for the differences in the different surface qualities of the objects. Towards the end of the drawing, I sharpened up some of the edges and gave things a little bit more definition just to improve the depth. And I also used some graphite powder and a wash on the tinfoil surface. I didn't quite have the right sort of metallic quality before, so made it slightly greyer and used it in a very loose way, almost letting the tone kind of find its own way on the paper. And I added in a little bit more background tone just to round out the composition.